So thank you so much for sharing your gift. What an awesome opportunity for us to hear you. Thank you. Love changes everything. I love the idea that love changes how you live and how you die. Think about that. You know, lyrics of songs sometimes are more powerful than just about any other form of communication. It's really huge. And so as we move into this, as Glenda mentioned, this entire month of talking about spirituality without borders, this spiritual independence that's based on wisdom that is found in so many traditions, I love what Lama Surya Das says, because he says in the little book, The Big Questions and How to Live a Life of Purpose and Find Your Own Answers, he says, love is the way, the truth, and the light that is common to all religions and humanistic philosophies. Now, you may have heard that in a little different way, depending on what tradition you come from. But love is the way, the truth, and the light. And that idea is common in so many, really all major religions and spiritual paths and philosophies, and it's a huge concept. So that's what we're going to talk about today, of course, because we're celebrating what? Valentine's Day, which is why we're wearing red and looking quite fancy today. So it's heart-centered. We're focusing on love today and matters of the heart. You know, we talk about love a lot. There's lots of kinds of love, yeah? And today, as we focus on Valentine's Day, the kind of love that comes to mind is that sort of lacy, rosy, hearts and flowers, chocolate, you know, Valentine candy boxes with silk roses and velvet and that kind of thing. That's one kind of love for sure. That intimate love that's all about that magic spell. We've all been there, haven't we? Some of us spend a lifetime looking for that again, don't we? I know. The romance of life, that passion, that sort of, you know, it's all about the other, that intensity, that passion, that desire. Those pheromones get going. Is that what they call them? Yeah. That's one kind of love, and that certainly is a kind of love that Valentine's Day often speaks to. And really it is one kind of love, but it's not the mature kind of love, because it's dependent very much on circumstances and on somebody else. And so it can mature, that kind of love can certainly mature into a deeper kind of love beyond the surface of the romance, into an emotional love, which is what we're about here at Common Ground, this emotional love of bonding, of connection, where we become soul friends, anam cara, in the Celtic tradition, where we're friends at the heart level, at a soul level, where we build trust and we start to have open hearts with each other because of the field of trust that we have created. That's, you know, families, friends, small groups, whatever, this kind of community, we build that emotional bond with each other. So there's this emotional love that doesn't depend on anything other than our deep desire to be with each other and develop that sense of trust. And of course then there's the most difficult to cultivate. Lama Surya Das tells us this is the most difficult one to cultivate, and this is conscious love. Conscious love. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Conscious love. This divine, unconditioned love that is not dependent on circumstances. It's not dependent on what the other people do. There are no agendas around this kind of love. Boy, it's a hard one. There are no reservations around it. No expectations. It's that place of sacred, holy love that's selfless, without expectation. That's big love. That's big, big love. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So as we focus on this, I love the idea that learning how to love, and of course you could call this anything you want. You don't necessarily have to call it love. Learning to honor and recognize your divine self, learning to step into the big mind of the divine energy that God is. It doesn't matter what you call it. We're calling it love today. But learning how to love is the goal and the purpose of our spiritual life. It's the goal and purpose of all this practice that we've move into, all of this work that we do in our soul's journey. How to love well, and then how to be that love embodied in our walk in the world. That's what it's all about. How do we, take on that quality, allow it to express through us and as us in the world? And so the obvious question is this morning, we ask ourselves, how well have I loved? How well do I love? What does that look like in my life? What does that look like in my life right now in this moment in time? Mother Teresa, the great saint and wisdom keeper, she says it isn't how much we do in life, but how much love we put into the doing. It isn't how much we give in our life experience. It's how much love are we putting into the giving. The whole idea here is that love changes everything. It determines how we walk in the world. This energy, this quality of the divine that expresses as love. It's vital. We all need love. If we don't get love, guess what happens? We wither up and die. Babies without love don't survive. They are not able to survive the human condition without love. Human warmth and affection and this loving energy is one of the most important things in our soul's journey. It's a basic necessity. Many of you met Zach, who sang for us on the platform, and I've talked about Zach as a new member of the household at Santa Clara, which is where I live. And I was bringing Zach home from an appointment recently. He has some mental health issues in conjunction with his recovery, his addiction recovery, and we were driving home from mental health. And we were talking about his journey. He's got 86 days of sobriety from heroin addiction. Pretty awesome. Living in the playhouse in my backyard, Janie's playhouse. It sounds weird, but he's got a flat screen TV, electricity. He's styling. He's got his own MacBook. He's got a nice new guitar. Everything's good for Zach. So it's not what it sounds like. But what I want to tell you is that as we were driving home and talking about his recent journey over the last 86 days, he said something so profound to me. He said, the one thing that's made a difference in my life is the love that I feel. The love, because we picked up a mountain of prescriptions, he said, you know what? Love is the best prescription. Love is the best prescription. That's the healing element here. That's the healing. So sometimes stuff happens in our life. It gets complex. It gets weird. It gets scary. It gets odd. But when we step into this loving energy, it changes everything. And sometimes when we're in difficult situations, we forget our own loveliness. That's the language of Salzburg. What's Sharon Salzberg. Sharon Salzberg, thank you. That's the language of Sharon Salzberg. We forget our own loveliness. That we are that, we can be that, and we are lovable. This loveliness that we are, we forget that because we're so immersed in the mess of life, you see. So it's this quality. So what gets in the way of our capacity to remember our loveliness, to remember to keep our heart open, to remember to embody that quality, and to let it touch us? You see, some of us go through life very defended. The invitation in the meditation to allow your breastbone to melt toward your spine. Just think how often you feel totally guarded and armored right here. Because sometimes the world doesn't feel safe. Sometimes it doesn't feel safe. And we put up these walls, we put up these boundaries, we isolate our heart from the icky stuff of life, from all of the stuff that's going on. We isolate ourselves by putting this protective cocoon around ourselves to keep us safe so that nothing penetrates. And guess what happens when we don't let it in? Guess what? We can't let it out either. It's an exchange of energy. We have these interior boundaries sometimes, and part of our spiritual journey is to identify, what does that look like? How is it showing up? Is it showing up like numbing your way through life to keep from feeling the feelings and the pain and the fear of life that, squash your capacity to remember your loveliness? That was certainly my journey with alcoholism, 27, almost 28 years of sobriety. Yes. And so, but I know that part of that addiction process was about numbing so I didn't have to feel vulnerable in life. And we all do it in different ways. We shop. Maybe it's sex for you. Maybe it's food, chocolate. Well, I got chocolate too. Coffee latte. Yep, there you go. So sometimes we do it in a lot of different ways, you see, but we have this tendency to armor ourselves, to protect ourselves, so that we can stay guarded, so we don't have to feel our emotions, because guess what? Sometimes it's not safe. We think it's not safe to feel and identify our emotions. So we close our hearts down to protect ourselves, and we get numb in one way or another around this, this outer thing. And this is my journey, and so I'll share it with you because it might be yours too. So we just protect ourselves, and we have this cocoon around us, and everything's good. And guess what? It just looks so calm on the outside, doesn't it? We just come across as very calm, very put together. Oh, doesn't bother me. Yep, I'm calm. I'm loving. Everything's good. But underneath that, very often, that exterior. Now, some people are lucky and they've just got a calm exterior all the time and nothing's going on. But sometimes stuff is going on, and we present this calm outer surface vision, but inside we're really shut down, we're really cocooned off because it's not safe for us to feel our feelings. Anybody here identify with that? You don't have to raise your hands, but I know it's the truth. Because we're scared. We're scared if we feel our feelings and we identify this thing, then maybe someone will think we're not loving. Maybe somebody will think we're not kind. Maybe somebody will think whatever, and we might think that about ourselves if we let ourselves feel these feelings. You see, we're harshest on ourselves. We're afraid of the destructive power. Oh God, let's not let that one go. What could happen? What could happen? So this is a common challenge. How can we be with whatever we're feeling in the moment, not let it paralyze us, not let us numb to life in general, in every area, because man, you can't numb to just one area. You numb to everything. You can't do selective numbing. You numb to everything, you see. And I had kind of a difficult last couple of weeks, and I was so encouraged when I read that even the Dalai Lama gets angry. He says, in situations of great injustice, I can get angry for a time. But then I think, what's the use? And I gradually transform that anger into an open heart, into love, and into compassion. And so I thought, oh, that's good. So as we're speaking of anger, I was carrying around this experience that I'd had. And first I got sick. Then I got my fibromyalgia kicked up so bad I could hardly move. Then my back went out. Okay, are you hearing this? This is what we do to ourselves. And I'm just going, boy, I sure don't feel good. Not identifying that I had at the heart of my experience an anger issue. Because I don't do anger. Finally talked to my son, brilliant master's level person back there who's going to be a counselor in drug addiction. And I was explaining the situation to him, and he said, Mom, this is what anger feels like. You don't do anger. You don't do anger. This is anger. And it's showing up all these ways. You can't identify it because you don't like to be angry. You don't like to own anger. This is anger. And I thought, ew. I don't like it. But once I got it, that that's what was going on, guess what? Once I could see it, and of course the situation didn't change. The situation was what it was, right? It still is. But the thing is, my heart softened to it. That's why I picked this image behind me. something happens and there becomes this opening in awareness that goes, oh, okay, so I'm angry, that's okay. I can be angry about this. I don't have to act on it. See, we can be aware without the necessity to act on it. I was telling Glenda about my situation. She says, I just want to go slap him. I just want to go slap him for you. See? She was joking, of course. Of course. But we can identify and allow those feelings to be safe enough to move through us so that we don't make ourselves sick. So that we don't reach for our default. In my case would be alcohol. Thank God I don't go there. But we don't reach for that default. See? We don't lash out at people. We don't let that happen. So what I know about that is it's okay. We can still have an open heart. We can still know our loveliness. We can still be kind and compassionate and loving. And guess what? We can give ourselves permission to get angry sometimes and to own it and to realize that some things just don't feel very good and let that be okay. See, it doesn't take away from our capacity to love, from our capacity to know our own loveliness. To be able to embrace all of it, the parts that hurt and the parts that heal, that's what's important. We got to be able to have a mature spirituality that allows us to hold it all at the same time so that we can heal it. So that we can heal it. And you know what? We can't leave anything out. It would be lovely if we could just go tripping through the tulips and everything was beautiful and fluffy and, lacy and rosy and violety and chocolatey. That'd be great. But guess what? It doesn't happen that way. My life sure doesn't. So the capacity to hold it all at the same time, somehow when we don't leave anything out, somehow we're able to transform whatever is going on into something new, to allow it to birth itself in a way that does not pull us into that abyss of whatever. How do we do it? Well, for one thing, we got to give up expectations. See, for me, this anger was around an expectation. We got to give it up. We got to give up expectations. We got to move into that unconditioned place that allows us to be with whatever shows up. Does that mean that we're not going to feel it and we're not going to go, geez, how could you? Of course we're going to do that. But if we attach to that expectation, you know what? That's gonna give us a real problem. So we got to just love. We got to just love through the experience. We got to remember who we are. We got to remember, like my son was showing me in the big book, he says, Mom, leave anger to people who do it better. Leave anger to people who do it better than you do, and just remember that all of these experiences, your own and the other, is about spiritual sickness, because you've got this thing going on in this, whatever this thing is, that is pulling you down, and you're not being your best loving self through it. Well, those are my words. He didn't say that. He wouldn't say that. But you're not being your best loving self through this experience when you're paralyzed by it, you see? And guess what? You got to begin somewhere. So for me, you know what? I just gave myself permission to love me, because I thought, how could you do this to yourself? You made yourself sick. You put yourself in bed at 6:30 on Tuesday night because you couldn't move. You put yourself at the massage place on Monday night because your back hurt so bad you couldn't breathe. How could you do this to yourself? You've got to love yourself first. Start there. Start somewhere. And then you can expand that. And then we get to move into these other kinds of experiences. The Christian tradition says the greatest commandment is love one another. And I say, start with me. Start with yourself. Love yourself and love the other also. So here's your invitation. Remember, when you're feeling icky, be willing to take a look at what's going on beneath the surface of whatever that thing is. Be willing to say, is my heart closed? Am I making myself sick over this thing, whatever it is? Am I willing to open the door of my heart a little bit so that I can allow the light to come in and transform this experience? Love is the way. the truth, and the light. Love. Love is the way, the truth, and the light. So the invitation as we move into this week of Valentine's Day, ask yourself, how well have I loved? How well am I loving? And then be that love embodied. Love changes everything. It makes a difference in how you live your life and ultimately how you die. Thank you for listening.